Hello and thank you for joining us. My name is Stephen Perlin. I'm here with UHS Clinical Registered Dietitian Kelvin Lee. And today, March actually, is National Nutrition Month, and today happens to be Registered Dietitian Day. So who better to be with than a registered dietitian? Thank you for joining us, Kelvin.
Thank you. Good to be here.
We're going to answer some of your questions about diets and nutrition, and I think we're ready to get started. So, Kelvin, we're going to start with question number one.
Okay.
It comes from Kayla, and she asked, what are the benefits of a keto diet, and is it safe to maintain long term?
Okay, so benefits of a keto diet. When people say benefits and they ask what are the benefits, I more refer to the observations of a keto diet. And one thing that we do observe is that people do lose weight on a keto diet. That's why it's so popular right now. But the reason why they lose weight is not because the keto diet is some magic formula. If you notice that they use the word diet after, it's because that's exactly what it is. It's a diet. So they're restricting calories in one form or another, and by restricting the calories to such an extreme measure, you will be losing weight. So for the keto diet, you're restricting your carbohydrate intake. So people may think, oh, okay, well, I'm restricting all of the bad foods like white bread, white rice, but what they don't realize is some of those healthy carbs in the diet don't necessarily come from the white foods like that. For example, a banana, it has carbohydrate in it, so by that logic, yes, something like a Snickers bar, lots of carbohydrate, but a banana has carbohydrate too, so everyone knows a banana is healthier than a Snickers bar. So the benefit of the keto diet is more of the observation of weight loss, and is it safe to maintain for the long term? The problem is no long-term studies exist on the effect of continuous keto diet. Most people tend to fall off the diet bandwagon after maybe a year at most. We don't have any 5 or 10-year studies, so we don't know. The only thing that we do know is that because you're restricting so much carbohydrate in the keto diet, your calories come from fat and from protein. And the World Health Organization just released their recommendations to say to have less processed meat because of the links to things like colorectal cancer, higher blood pressure because of the sodium content, things like that. So in summation, it's a great question though, by the way. The observation is it does have weight loss because it restricts calories, because it's a calorie restrictive diet. But as soon as you stop the keto diet, the weight comes back on. So it's not really quite sustainable. So really great question. Thank you for asking.
Would it be, just to follow up on that question, would the idea to take some aspects of the keto diet and bring it into your regular day life and kind of maintain it that way?
I mean, some people like the fact that the keto diet really focuses on, vegetables, a lot of vegetables in your diet. So, if you're looking to make a healthy step forward, maybe instead of doing something as extreme as a keto diet, focus on one healthy sort of, step that you'll pick up. So instead of saying, go completely keto diet, maybe you can say, well, I'm going to make it a point now to have vegetables at lunch and dinner, seeing as how I only have vegetables at dinner once in a while, and I'll be lucky if I even have that. So that would be one thing you could take away from it.
Okay, great. So there's something to learn from the keto diet, even if you can't maintain it.
Mm-hmm.
Our next question comes from Monica. The question is almond milk or other nut milk beverages a good alternative to regular cow's milk?
For children, I saw that question too. They were asking if it was almond or other nut milk beverages are a good alternative than cow's milk for children. So it's a great question. So when they say nut milk, most people are referring to almond milk, cashew milk, even coconut milk, because coconut, it's in the tree nut family, so it sort of counts as a nut milk. Even soy milk, as everyone knows, soy is a legume, but it's in that category of dairy alternatives. And as far as if almond or other nut milk beverages are a good alternative to cow's milk for children, what I say to that is the current guidelines for newborns is they recommend breastfeeding from birth till at least 6 months of age, and preferably up to a year, exclusively on breast milk, things like that. And then after that 1 year, when they're ready to transition to other things, or whenever they transfer, even if it's less than a year and you're ready to transition them. And one thing I wanted to point out too is that if breastfeeding is an issue for some mothers for whatever reason, formula is an acceptable replacement as well. But when they're ready to transition over to another type of milk, the recommendation, believe it or not, is actually for whole cow's milk. The reason being, people think, well, it's so bad for you, but it's not necessarily that. Children need a lot of more nutrients to grow and develop than a normal adult. So the calories, the protein, the vitamins and minerals in the cow's milk, it's all there. Now, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of reasons to avoid cow's milk. The most common one would, of course, be lactose intolerance. So, if lactose-free milk, like lactate is an option, you could always try that. Also, if you were to pick a milk, I would recommend soy milk. If there's no food allergies to any of the nut milks, including soy, I would actually recommend soy milk as a replacement for cow's milk because it has the most natural protein compared to the other nut milks. It's got a lot of natural calcium, some B vitamins, sometimes they'll add a little bit of vitamin C too, or C as well. So I would recommend soy milk if regular whole milk for children is not an option. So again, that was another really great question.
I know from my personal experience, when my son was ready, they told me to go to whole milk, and that was the best milk for him.
Yep, exactly. Just strictly from a calorie perspective, per pound, children require the most nutrients compared to any other state of growth and development in their life. So to restrict calories by doing skim milk or like 1% milk for a child, it's not really indicated quite yet.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Well, moving on to our next question. This comes from Mark. What's the difference between good fats and bad fats? And how do you make sure you're getting the right ones?
That's a great question. So, I do appreciate your question, Mark. And the good fat versus bad fat thing, to group something into the term good or bad, it kind of stigmatizes certain things. But as far as fat goes, the most important thing you have to remember is your body needs fat because it's responsible for production of all sorts of hormones, for proper tissue maintenance, anti-inflammatory properties in some instances. So your body does need fat. When people say bad fat, they think of basically saturated fat and trans fat. Saturated fat basically is defined as, things that mostly are solid at room temperature. So you think of like your coconut oil, your butter, things like that. Whereas the good fats, they're more referring to like olive oil and canola oil. So all foods contain a little bit of those so-called bad fats, but that's okay. The real benefit is balancing out your diet with more of the beneficial fats like canola and olive oil when you're cooking. And if you want to make sure you're getting the right one, that's generally the rule of thumb. For cooking, you want to make sure you have canola oil or olive oil. Those are always great options. If you're cooking, I recommend plain olive oil, not extra virgin olive oil, because it tends to flavor the food too strongly with that olive flavor. And then when you read your nutrition labels, you just want to make sure it has the lowest amount of saturated fat on the label as possible. And really, that's the most straightforward approach as far as making sure you're getting the right one.
Yes, I think part of it's probably being educated, just kind of understanding things a little bit better and what you're putting in your body.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Makes sense. Well, thank you, Mark, for that question. Moving on, Jen was asking, what is kombucha and is it good for you?
Oh, so someone must have noticed we're selling kombucha now in the cafes at Binghamton General and Wilson. So thank you, Jen, for that question. So kombucha is basically a fermented food. So when we think of fermented foods, other foods that are fermented are like your blue cheeses, your sauerkraut, things like that. They're all fermented, and what that means is they basically try and promote the intentional and controlled growth of beneficial bacteria. So that's basically what kombucha is. It's obviously not as chunky or sour as sauerkraut. It's basically what you do is you take tea and you add a little bit of sugar and some beneficial bacteria. That's the most basic form of kombucha, basically. And basically the bacteria translate that sugar into, all sorts of beneficial, products, byproducts, things like that. And those probiotics that are formed in it, are supposed to have supposedly health benefits for your gut, So everyone hears about probiotics because they're in yogurt, they're the beneficial bacteria that are supposed to help with gut health. So they also exist in kombucha. So the question is whether or not it's good for you. It's hard to say because bacteria are living beings, and as you know, there's a lot of stomach acid. So when we consume any sort of probiotic, you really wonder how much actually makes it through to your gut. But even if not a lot of the healthy bacteria make it through from your stomach acid into your gut, it's still basically a mostly sugar-free beverage. There's really very little sugar because the bacteria, convert all of that sugar into carbon dioxide. So that's what I forgot to mention is when I said the bacteria convert sugar into other bacteria, that didn't quite make sense. It converts it into carbon dioxide and other things. So you might notice your kombucha has a little bit of fizz, but that's that healthy bacteria kind of doing their thing. But even if that bacteria didn't make it through, there's very little sugar in it, so it counts as a great source of hydration because not a lot of people really drink enough fluid. There's very little sugar. The only thing I would advise with kombucha is some kombuchas do contain alcohol and some do contain caffeine. So for various health reasons who are avoiding caffeine or alcohol, they do make decaffeinated and alcohol-free ones. Of course, being in a hospital, we don't sell the alcoholic version. It's the alcohol-free one. So that's actually a great question because kombucha it's showing up in a lot of supermarkets. So that's a really good question.
Sounds like something worth trying.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, we have a question that comes from Bill, and I'm surprised it's actually our first gluten question. But is gluten-free bread better for you than regular bread?
That's a really great question. Gluten-free is still really popular in the food movement. Anyone who's gone to supermarkets now noticed an eruption in the aisle for gluten-free items. So basically, gluten-free, the way I'll start by saying that is the only people who really truly need to avoid gluten are people with a condition called celiac disease. They physically cannot consume gluten without becoming ill. People think, gluten intolerance and celiac disease must be on the rise, hence everyone's becoming sick from gluten. That's not necessarily true. The reason why it seems like celiac disease is on the rise is because our diagnosis of celiac disease has become much more sophisticated. Back then we would think, someone just had an upset stomach from eating too much pasta. When actually we've had much better diagnostic testing to prove, no, you actually have celiac disease, you should probably cut back. And celiac disease has different levels of severity for different people. Some people it could just mean an upset stomach. Some people, if they consume gluten, they'll end up in a coma, in a hospital. So it was very difficult to identify celiac disease. So technically, people with celiac disease are really the only ones who need to avoid gluten in their diet. The reason why we're seeing so many products now is because, unfortunately, it is a health trend. It's just another fad. But the people who benefit the most are celiac disease patients, because back then, if you wanted to avoid gluten, you could only eat rice or potatoes. Now you have all sorts of gluten-free things, but the problem is, now that it's a diet trend, if you look carefully in your gluten-free section, you'll notice several things that are gluten-free that may not be the wisest choice to eat on a daily basis. They make gluten-free donuts, they make gluten-free cake, they make gluten-free pie, gluten-free pizza. French fries are technically classified as gluten-free because they're made out of potatoes, Wow. So the gluten-free halo, it's great for people with celiac disease to manage their symptoms, but really beyond that, it's like I said, you can have gluten-free cake, so it's quite it's a little bit tricky, because it technically is a food fad. So another great question. Thank you, Bill. It's a really good question.
Great, and that was our last question. Thank you everybody for joining us and watching. And if you have any more nutrition questions, stay tuned throughout the month. We'll have more facts on our Facebook page and throughout UHS. Thank you very much.
Thank you.